Hey everyone, hope you are all doing great. Today we are diving into a really exciting and practical topic, trigger frameworks in Salesforce. Now, if you have worked as a Salesforce developer, chances are you have written at least one trigger during your journey, probably more than one. But writing a trigger is just the beginning. As your org grows, so does the complexity. And that's exactly where a trigger framework becomes essential. So, before we jump into writing one, let's take a step back and understand what is trigger, why do we need a trigger framework, and what benefit does it actually bring. We have got that foundation, I will walk you through how to write a trigger framework using a virtual class. So stick around, let's get into it. A trigger is executed automatically in response to specific database events such as insert, update, or delete operation on records. However, a trigger without proper design can cause significant performance issues and become difficult to debug and maintain. A trigger framework offers several benefits. Separation of concern, it keeps trigger clean by moving business logic into dedicated handler class. Code reusability, the logic written in handler classes can be reused across other components like batch class, controllers, etc. Scalability, it allows you to easily add or manage logic for different trigger contexts, such as before insert, after insert, etc. Testability, you can directly test the logic in the handler method without needing to fire the actual trigger. Single trigger per object. You avoid common problem caused by having multiple triggers on the same object, such as unpredictable order of execution. You can think of a trigger framework like an L1 support team. Instead of product team handling every issue directly, the L1 team analyze the issue and route it to the appropriate team for resolution. Similarly, the trigger delegate works to the right handler based on the context. Let's see how to implement trigger framework using a virtual class. So first I will let you know how to write a trigger using a virtual class, and then I will show you the demo where it can be useful. So let's get started. I have already logged in into my Salesforce account. So this is my Salesforce account, and let me navigate to developer org, developer console. So this is my developer console, and I have written a trigger framework using a virtual class. So this is my trigger framework. Don't worry, I will provide a link where you can access the code as well. So yeah, so this particular class is a virtual class. From this particular virtual keyword, you can able to understand that this is a virtual class. And this virtual class contain some method and some variable. So I have defined some public, I mean private variable and some public method in this particular virtual class. So like the context, is trigger executing? That means trigger is executing or not. For to stop the recursion, I have introduced one integer called recursion check, and also the recursion map same is handled for the recursion. Bypass handler, I will come to this bypass handler later, just uh, at the last. Now after this, so first what it is, so first it will set the context of all the variable. Like if it is executing before trigger, I mean is before and is insert, then we are setting it to trigger context dot before insert. And before insert, before update, for that one we have created an enum. Now once that is um done, so we can go through it like a bypass trigger. I will come to this later. So other than that, yeah, this is the main class, main method that we are going to call it from different trigger handler class. So that is the run one, and in this particular run method we are actually checking whether to call the before insert method or before update method and or before delete, etc. Now before insert, before update, we actually define this particular method. So this is not defined. Okay, so you can see here, this is the virtual method that we have not defined it yet, and we will define this particular method in our trigger handler classes. We just define it here, and we actually all the code logic will opt for before insert, before update, or any other context. We will write the code in our trigger handler class. This is a common class that can be used by any particular trigger. Like it can be used by account trigger, contact trigger, case trigger, from every trigger it can be used. So that's why it's become generic. We don't want to write any type of business logic in this class. It's just a framework so that using this framework we can easily manage our trigger. Okay. So now, yeah, from here, depending upon context, we are calling different method, and suppose account is my trigger. So in the account trigger, we do not write any logic, anything. We just call this particular account trigger handler virtual. This is a class that we are going to use, and inside this class, this is the handler class of the account trigger. All the code logic regarding account trigger will will be written in this account trigger handler virtual class. In this particular class, what we are going to do, we are going to extend the trigger handler using virtual. That is the main virtual class that we have written as part of trigger framework that I have just shown you. This is the class that we are going to extend. So as it is a virtual class, so we need to use the extend. If it is an interface, we need to use implement. So that but I am reiterating the same thing. So I use extend, and then I extend that particular virtual class. Once that is set, then what I am doing, so you can see here we are calling the run method, but run method is not here. Run method is actually present in trigger handler using virtual. So in this particular class, what we are doing in the run method, we are actually checking whether it is valid or not. If it is valid, then go ahead with the before insert, before update, before delete, whatever. If it is not valid, then stop it here. So why we are doing that one? That will come as part of bypass handler. So once you are set, like you know that your trigger context is before update or before insert or after insert, whatever, you just override that particular method in this particular account trigger handler virtual class, and you can write your code logic, whatever business logic you want to use, you can write it here. Same for the contract trigger. In the contract trigger, we created a contract trigger handle virtual class, and we are calling the run method. Same wise, here also we are extend that particular virtual class that we have created as part of the framework, and in that particular one, depending upon the context, we have written our code logic for before update. So that is what we have written. How it works, I will come to that one. Now you can able to see in this particular code that we want to bypass account trigger. We are updating account name, but we want to bypass it so that it should not invoke account trigger. Now how to do that? Using this virtual trigger framework. I mean trigger framework using virtual class. How to do that one? To do that one, I have created this bypass. This is the bypass method that I have created, and inside this bypass method I am sending the handler name. So I know the handler, the trigger handler name of account trigger is account trigger handler virtual. I am passing that to bypass method. And inside this bypass method, how it is going to bypass it? So when we are calling the run method, this is the run method, it will call the validate run. So validate run will do what? Let's see that one. So this is the validate run. Validate run will check whether, so when we pass that handler name, it added that handler name in the bypass handler set. So that is a set. If you see, this is a set of string. It added that particular value in that particular set. Now in the validate run, it is checking whether that particular set contains the get handler name or not. And what is the get handler name is another you can say another method, and in that get handler name we are getting the name of that particular handler. Okay, so once we get that one, then it is saying that this is not a valid one, you should not run this one. So that's how it is bypassing those handler. And then once it is bypassed, you can use clear bypass to remove it from the that particular set, or you can use clear all bypass to clear the particular set. So that is how this generally we use this one using, we bypass this one using our bypass method and clear bypass method. So now let's see it in action, like whether it is bypassing it actually or not, and whether the trigger is actually invoking that one or not. So I have opened a particular account, that is trigger test account, and trigger test account has a contact, that is test trigger virtual. Okay, now if I edit that one, so ideally what it should happen, it should let me first comment it out, then I will show you. So what I will do, I will not bypass anything at first. Okay, it will be as is. So it will be as is. So it will happen with trigger and it will update the account. And I want to see whether it is actually coming to account virtual class or not. For that one, I have written this trigger invoked so that we can able to understand that it is coming inside the trigger handler virtual. So let me do it first. So let me edit the phone number. So I'm editing the phone number of this particular one. So okay, 66, and I will save it. So I have saved this one. Now my contact got updated and as well as the account name. Now if I refresh this particular page, I will see that my account name got updated with the same name, that is no trigger, with trigger and trigger invoked. So with trigger, trigger invoked, it does change. Now let me show you how we can able to bypass the trigger. So let me reopen this one and then I will comment it out and I will save it. So here what we are doing, we are bypassing account trigger and we are just updating the name as no trigger. So now let me again update the contact phone number and let's see whether it is working fine or not. So I will change it to 77 again and I will save it and then bingo. So it changed to no trigger. If I refresh it, then also I will see it change it to no trigger. So if it is changed it to no trigger, that means we are 100% sure that this particular um, trigger handler does not invoke. So that is why this trigger invoked does not appended with the account name, and see no trigger. So that means it does not appended with that one. Okay, so that is how you can bypass the trigger using the trigger framework, and you can use the trigger framework using, you can write the virtual trigger framework like this. That is all about today's session regarding trigger handler using virtual class. Before ending this particular session, let me show you one thing regarding this particular framework, how we use that one. So this is how the trigger framework use. In this particular one, the orange one is the one that you need to create for each object, and the trigger handler is part of the framework. So first it will see, so you need to create a trigger for each and every object, only one trigger, and you need to create one trigger handler for each object. In that trigger handler, you need to write your all the business logic, all the logic in that one, and that particular trigger handler should extend the class that is created as part of trigger framework, that is trigger handler. And in this trigger handler you can you can mention that before insert, before update, when to call, how to call that one, and in your trigger handler the actual code logic or business logic should reside. So that is the flow of how trigger framework, using a virtual class, we can uh, implement that one. So yeah, that is all about today's session. Hope you like this video. Please do like, share, and subscribe. Signing off for today. See you in my next video soon. Thank you.